tired, I replied, lowering the books away from my nose. I walked quickly through the original 15th century part of the library, past the rows of Elizabethan reading desks with their 3 ascending bookshelves and scarred writing surfaces. Between them, Gothic windows directed the reader's attention up to the coffered ceilings, where bright paint and gilding picked out the details of the university's crest of 3 crowns and open book, and where its motto, "God is my illumination," was proclaimed repeatedly from on high. Another American academic, Gillian Chamberlain, was my sole companion in the library on this Friday night. A classicist who taught at Bryn Mawr, Gillian spent her time poring over scraps of papyrus sandwiched between sheets of glass. I sped past her, trying to avoid eye contact, but the creaking of the old floor gave me away. My skin tingled as it always did when another witch looked at me. "Diana?" she called from the gloom. I smothered a sigh and stopped. "Hi, Gillian." Unaccountably possessive of my hoard of manuscripts, I remained as far from the witch as possible and angled my body so they weren't in her line of sight. "What are you doing for Mabon?" Gillian was always stopping by my desk to ask me to spend time with my sisters while I was in town. With the Wiccan celebrations of the autumn equinox just days away, she was redoubling her efforts to bring me into the Oxford coven. "Working," I said promptly. "There are some very nice witches here, you know," Gillian said with prim disapproval. "You really should join us on Monday." "Thanks. I'll think about it," I said, already moving in the direction of the Selden End, the airy 17th century edition that ran perpendicular to the main axis of Duke Humphreys. "I'm working on a conference paper, though, so don't count on it." My Aunt Sarah had always warned me that it wasn't possible for one witch to lie to another, but that hadn't stopped me from trying. Gillian made a sympathetic noise, but her eyes followed me. Back at my familiar seat, facing the arched, leaded windows, I resisted the temptation to dump the manuscripts on the table and wipe my hands. Instead, mindful of their age, I lowered the stack carefully. The manuscript that had appeared to tug on its call slip lay on top of the pile. Stamped in gilt on the spine was a coat of arms belonging to Elias Ashmole, a 17th century book collector and alchemist, whose books and papers had come to the Bodleian from the Ashmolean Museum in the 19th century, along with the number 782. I reached out, touching the brown leather. A mild shock made me withdraw my fingers quickly, but not quickly enough. The tingling traveled up my arms, lifting my skin into tiny goose pimples, then spread across my shoulders, tensing the muscles in my back and neck. These sensations quickly receded, but they left behind a hollow feeling of unmet desire. Shaken by my response, I stepped away from the library table. Even at a safe distance, this manuscript was challenging me, threatening the walls I'd erected to separate my career as a scholar from my birthright as the last of the bishop witches. Here, with my hard-earned doctorate, tenure and promotions in hand, and my career beginning to blossom, I'd renounced my family's heritage and created a life that depended on reason and scholarly abilities, not inexplicable hunches and spells. I was in Oxford to complete a research project. Upon its conclusion, my findings would be published, substantiated with extensive analysis and footnotes, and presented to human colleagues, leaving no room for mysteries and no place in my work for what could be known only through a witch's 6th sense. But, albeit unwillingly, I had called up an alchemical manuscript that I needed for my research and that also seemed to possess an otherworldly power that was impossible to ignore. My fingers itched to open it and learn more. Yet an even stronger impulse held me back. Was my curiosity intellectual, related to my scholarship, or did it have to do with my family's connection to witchcraft? I drew the library's familiar air into my lungs and shut my eyes.